She had decided to leave. It was D-Day.
I was mad at my daughter.
Nadine Chabert had gone over to another world. There were conversations with the dead.
There's no corpse, there's no confession.
If she disappeared one day, they should be worried and look at her husband.
They're not looking for Nadine. They're trying to make me confess the unspeakable, what they want to hear.
They crushed us. They belittled us. They did us in.
On Wednesday, June 10th, 2003, Nadine Chabert says goodbye to her daughter Emily for the last time.
She gives me a kiss. She says, "I love you, my baby." Like usual.
No one will see this 33-year-old mother again.
I didn't understand what was happening at all.
Is it possible that Nadine Chabert chose to disappear of her own free will?
She told me she was going to leave.
Emily had even heard her mother say several times on the phone, "But if I leave, who will take care of them?"
Days passed without Nadine Chabert showing any signs of life. After following the lead of a voluntary departure, the police consider another possibility.
Nadine did not disappear, but was killed by her husband.
Because Nadine had described her husband as troubling.
But Patrick Chabert, supported by his daughter, proclaims his innocence.
There are no charges against me. There are only assumptions.
I was there. I was there. My father didn't kill her. I was there.
After 15 months in jail, Patrick Chabert is finally acquitted.
The tears were flowing. Tears of joy.
New investigations are being carried out. Who is the man that Nadine Chabert met the night she disappeared?
We don't really know if he's a close friend, a lover, or both.
Why is Nadine Chabert's best friend getting so involved in the investigation?
Nadine Chabert was enthralled by this woman. We even thought there was something more between them.
What could explain the change in Nadine Chabert's behavior shortly before her disappearance?
What jumps out is there are all the ingredients you find in other cults.
Jean-Marc Bloch, former head of the Versailles Police Department, and Negar Haedi, criminal lawyer, will join us as we look back on this unsolved case. Wednesday, June 11, 2003. A beautiful sunny day is forecast in Fos-sur-Mer. But this morning, the director of a vocational training company is worried because Nadine Chabert, one of his employees, hasn't come to work.
Around 9:20 a.m., my secretary came to me. Surprised, I simply told her, call her and see what's going on.
But Nadine Chabert doesn't answer the phone.
When you're used to someone who is a hard worker and lets you know about any small everyday problems, there's reasons to be surprised when they're absent and their phone goes unanswered.
Philippe Bourchet then asks one of his colleagues to go to the Chabert's home.
She goes there and tells me, listen, the door is closed, so are the shutters, and her car is out front. She isn't responding. That's all I know.
Where is Nadine Chabert? Why is this 33-year-old mother of one not at work?
I decided to call the nearest police station.
A few minutes later, police officers from Fos-sur-Mer receive another call reporting the young woman missing. This time, it's a friend of Nadine Chabert who's worried.
They call each other very regularly. They're very, very close. She's one of the first to really worry about what might have happened to Nadine.
Intrigued by these two successive calls, the police decide to go to Nadine Chabert's home. The house, in a residential area of Fosse-sur-Mer, is a large building on a family property of several acres.
On one side, there's the house where Nadine Chabert lives with her husband Patrick and their daughter Emily. And not very far from there is the house where Helen Perez lives, Nadine Chabert's mother.
The police also find the door locked. Unable to reach Nadine Chabert, they decide to call her husband, Patrick, a construction manager.
I was on a construction site in Toulon. I said, I'm coming. We'll see what's going on. I didn't understand what was happening at all.
Patrick Chabert is astonished. He explains to the police that the day before, on Tuesday, June 10th, his wife went to Paris to attend a professional training course for a few days. So it makes sense to him that Nadine is not at her office in Fosse-sur-Mer. Patrick Chabert doesn't understand why his wife's employer called the police this Wednesday, June 11th, to report her missing.
The husband berated me over the phone. What the hell is this? The police told me to come home. I'm at work. I have to go home. Otherwise, they're threatening to break down the door to see what's inside. Why did you call? What's it to me? Nadine does what she wants. I said, wait, sir, first, calm down. And second, when someone who's normally a good worker is absent for no reason, after 3 hours, if I don't have any information, I call the emergency services.
It's impossible that on Wednesday, June 11th, Nadine Chabert would be on a professional training course without her employer's knowledge. So why did she tell her husband that she had to go to Paris? Why did she leave her home? For now, the police are unable to answer these questions. Then, the investigators sent to the Chabert family property cross paths with Nadine's mother.
I said Nadine had gone to Paris. She told Patrick she had gone to a course in Paris. She told me she had gone to a course in Paris. There was no doubt.
Nadine Chabert's family doesn't seem worried. But the young woman is still unreachable. The police then decide to open a missing persons investigation. They ask the husband to come as soon as possible to answer their questions. The next day, Thursday, June 12th at 4:25 p.m., Patrick Chabert reports to the Fosse-sur-Mer police station.
They ask me questions. Where were you? Where's your wife? Etc. I tell them exactly what happened. I tell them on June 10th, I dropped her off at her request at a very specific place, the traffic circle by the supermarket.
Patrick Chabert adds that he dropped off his wife on Tuesday, June 10th at this traffic circle around 2 p.m., and he explains why.
A friend of hers was supposed to pick her up and drop her off at the Aix-en-Provence train station, the station that would take her to the Gare de Lyon in Paris.
It's now been 2 days since Nadine disappeared. Patrick Chabert shares his incomprehension. Why would his wife lie to him? He then offers the police an explanation for his wife's absence. Once or twice, she told me she would give up everything to start a new life.
He also tells them they're in divorce proceedings. In the end, maybe Nadine has left, and that's also why he isn't worried that there's been no word from Nadine.
At the request of the investigators, Patrick Chabert then describes how Nadine was dressed on the day of her supposed trip to Paris. He clearly remembers her getting out of his car with her small overnight bag. She was wearing a long blue skirt, a white blouse, and high-heeled shoes. When Patrick Chabert leaves the police station at around 5 p.m., he still doesn't understand why the police are so worried about his wife's disappearance. He returns home, hoping that his wife will eventually contact their 11-year-old daughter, Emily. The investigators, for their part, are determined to solve this disappearance, which they consider very concerning. Jean-Marc, what's striking at the start of this case is that a missing persons investigation has been opened. Even though Nadine Chabert is a 33-year-old woman, and both her husband and her mother show no concern. Do you think it's reasonable for the police to be so quickly concerned by Nadine Chabert's disappearance?
I admit that I'm a little surprised. There are between 40 and 50,000 reported disappearances in France every year. Among these disappearances, there are mothers who, for one reason or another, decide to cut all ties and change their lives. This is the possibility that Patrick Chabert is considering when he makes his first statement at the Haute-Savoie police station. What could explain why the police are swinging into action so quickly is that this disappearance has happened in the context of divorce proceedings. Is there conflict in this divorce? This is undoubtedly the question that the investigators are asking themselves, and that's why they take interest in this disappearance so quickly.
Patrick Chabert says he dropped his wife off on Tuesday, June 10th at a traffic circle outside Fos-sur-Mer, where she was supposed to meet a friend to go to the Aix-en-Provence train station. According to him, Nadine was going to Paris to attend a professional training course that was supposed to start on Wednesday, June 11th. However, her employer claims this was not the case. Who should we believe at the start of this case, Jean-Marc?
What is certain is that Nadine Chabert was not supposed to be on a course in Paris that Wednesday, so she had no professional reason to get on a train and leave her family on Tuesday. Either Nadine Chabert lied to her husband, or it's her husband who's lying.
This last theory, Jean-Marc, would mean that Patrick Chabert made up his story and is hiding something.
Yes, but at this stage of the investigation, it's too early to know who has lied. It's too early to know if Nadine Chabert left of her own accord, or if, on the contrary, something serious happened to her.
For the Fos-sur-Mer investigators, their priority is now to profile the missing young woman. Who is Nadine Chabert? What is her life like? Answering these questions may help explain her disappearance.
Nadine Chabert is a stylish 30-something who takes care of herself. She has blonde bobbed hair, she's smiley and very pretty.
Nadine and Patrick Chabert have been married for 12 years.
We met at a friend's house. We flirted. It turned out that we liked each other since we got married.
Nadine Chabert was then just 20 years old. Her husband was 6 years older.
She got married very young, yes. Emily was born immediately after.
A granddaughter and a wedding that made Nadine's mom happy.
They came to live with me. I gave them the land and they started building.
They built their house. Patrick Chabert, a construction manager, was very involved in the construction of the house. It meant a lot to him. It would house his family.
At the start of the marriage, Nadine Chabert didn't work and stayed home to take care of Emily.
She adored her daughter and her husband. They went on vacations. She was a totally normal woman, maybe with strength of character, but hey.
It was the perfect family. Well, no, that doesn't exist. But we were a family with a lot of love. A lot of love, a lot of simplicity. And I think those are the two most important things, simplicity and love. And that's why I had a perfect childhood.
With Emily growing up, Nadine Chabert decided to look for work.
I think it must have been important for her to go back to work, because like any human being, we need to feel useful. We need to be fulfilled.
My wife didn't work to get rich. She worked to have an occupation, to experience something. And it was normal after having a child. She wanted to, so she did it. You have to follow your desires.
Her entry into working life deeply changed Nadine Chabert's personality.
From then on, she changed as a person. She went out more, met people, and had hobbies.
Emily got the feeling that her mother was becoming distant.
She started to change and go out more, leaving us behind.
Almost every week, she went out either on Friday evenings or on Thursday evenings. She supposedly went out with her friends.
She went out almost every weekend. She even went out sometimes on weeknights. At times, I wasn't even aware of it.
She left her daughter all alone at home, the fridge empty. The kid was forced to go to her grandmother's to get something to eat. She forgot to pick up her daughter from school. It wasn't Nadine. For me, it wasn't Nadine.
Patrick Chabert no longer understood his wife's attitude.
One day she came home. I had come back from Toulon, I think. In the kitchen, she told me, "I want a divorce." I said, "Wait, I don't understand. I don't love you, I never have." First, you're dumbfounded. Then it's kind of a done deal and you smarten up. You don't want to ruin someone's life. If there's no love left, there's no point fighting.
For Emily's sake, the two spouses found a middle ground. They agreed that Nadine would stay with their daughter in the family home that belonged to her. But the young woman accepted that they would continue living under the same roof while her husband found a new place to live.
We lived together peacefully in the house, without any problems, without a hitch. Nothing at all, nothing. There you go.
I saw that they had separate bedrooms because they didn't hide it. I don't remember having a hard time with it. Everything was fine at home. I never saw them arguing.
Despite the divorce proceedings, everything was fine at home, according to Emily. So why did her mom disappear? Nagar, we've just heard from Nadine Chabert's family that she frequently went away for a few days without telling anyone. So the possibility that Nadine Chabert left voluntarily, deciding to cut ties with her family for good, can't be ruled out. Does an adult have the right to disappear?
It may seem surprising, but yes, a person who isn't guilty of any crime can disappear. And the police, after making sure that this person has left of their own free will by contacting them, don't have the right to inform their family of their whereabouts.
In this way, the individual freedom is protected.
Nadine Chabert is the mother of an 11-year-old girl, Emily. If she has really decided to leave home, could she be considered guilty of family abandonment?
The term family abandonment can be confusing, but in reality, it's the name given to an offense which, like all offenses, has a precise definition. Family abandonment is when a parent refuses to pay another parent the financial contribution decreed by a judge, for example, after a divorce. So, to return to our case, since Nadine Chabert is not required to pay any money under any judgment, she can't be accused of the offense of family abandonment.
It's now been 48 hours since anyone has heard from Nadine Chabert. The police decide to go to the young woman's home in the hope of discovering some clues to explain her disappearance. Patrick Chabert and his mother-in-law go with the investigators from room to room. Everything seems to be in order until they enter Nadine's room.
Her stuff was gone. There were some old clothes left, but otherwise, everything she usually wore was gone. No shoes, no makeup, luggage was missing.
Then, Helen Perez provides the police with an important piece of information. She has just realized that the money her daughter and son-in-law kept in a jar on the sideboard in the living room has disappeared.
They had a little money jar to save for a vacation, or maybe to buy something for the house. Now that jar was gone.
There were almost 2,000 euros in this jar. Where's the money? Could Nadine have taken it before leaving? After inspecting the house, the police decide to search the couple's car.
There, they come across a small pouch containing strange documents with small drawings, sketches, and sequences of numbers.
On these strange papers, Patrick Chabert recognizes his wife's handwriting. In the bag, there's also a book with the title Awakening, and a message addressed to Nadine Chabert, signed by someone called Isa. The message is of particular interest since it says, "You know exactly where you're going and why you're going there. Have a good trip."
It reinforces my idea that she left.
For us, it was obvious. She took her things, she'd had enough, she left.
After these discoveries in the house and in the car, Nadine Chabert's relatives are convinced that the young woman has decided to leave her family. Emily tries to contact her mother.
When Emily asked me, "Can I have your phone, Dad?" I told her, "Yes, call your mother." She took it and called her mother. She called her I don't know how many times, but there was no answer.
I called her regularly. I left voice messages, my grandmother and my father did too. Anyway, we were used to her sometimes leaving without a word in the middle of the week and coming back sometime later. We were hoping that overnight she would swan in, as if nothing had happened.
But the investigators do not share this hope. They are convinced that something serious has happened to Nadine Chabert. So they take action to find out what happened. The public prosecutor in Aix-en-Provence puts the Martigues authorities on the investigation into Nadine Chabert's disappearance. The police try to find out if a corpse matching the description of the young woman has been discovered. In vain. The mother's friends are questioned. All of them express their growing concern. It has now been a week since anyone has heard from Nadine Chabert. The investigation continues. On June 17, 2003, 7 days after the disappearance of Nadine Chabert, the investigators decide to go to the young woman's workplace. While searching her office, they find her agenda, which immediately reveals information that rocks the investigation. On Tuesday, June 10th, the day of her disappearance, the young woman wrote, "Divorce."
On June 10th, Nadine and Patrick had an appointment in the afternoon at 3 p.m. They were being summoned before the family affairs judge at the courthouse of Aix-en-Provence. It was their divorce conciliation appointment.
Why did Patrick Chabert never tell the police about this appointment? How could Nadine, who started the divorce proceedings, have missed this summons to the judge?
She was really looking forward to this appointment with the judge about the divorce, because for her, it meant a new life. It was a new beginning, and it was something she'd been waiting for, because she finally had the opportunity to live for herself, and she said so.
The police begin to doubt Patrick Chabert's testimony. They now find it hard to believe that the husband dropped off his wife at the Fosse-sur-Mer traffic circle on Tuesday, June 10th, at the time when they should have been arriving at the courthouse together. The investigators continue to leaf through the young woman's agenda. It turns out that contrary to what her husband has claimed since the start of the case, Nadine was not supposed to leave for Paris on Tuesday, June 10th, but on Wednesday, June 11th, for a course starting on Thursday, June 12th.
She had professional appointments that were scheduled for the morning of the 11th, and in the afternoon, she had to leave for a training course in Paris. But she had to leave on June 11th, not on June 10th.
So why would Nadine Chabert have told her husband that she was leaving for Paris on Tuesday, June 10th? The company secretary then shows the investigators the train timetable searches carried out by Nadine Chabert. And this is further proof that the young woman was planning to leave for Paris on Wednesday, June 11th.
From what was seen on the computer, there was a draft ticket, but it seems that ticket was never bought.
Why weren't the train tickets purchased? Did Nadine Chabert really intend to go on the course? The Martigues police officers then decide to question the young woman's co-workers. And these testimonies offer a new perspective.
The idea of a voluntary departure doesn't hold up for a lot of people, because many agreed that Nadine would not have left without her daughter.
Some even openly suspect Patrick Chabert of being involved in his wife's disappearance.
Because Nadine had described her husband as someone troubling and rather manipulative.
Nadine Chabert allegedly even said she was suspicious of her husband.
She was worried. She was scared.
At night, they had separate rooms, and she slept with the door locked.
It even seems that Nadine Chabert had mentioned to her colleagues the possibility of her disappearance.
So they're worried. She allegedly told them things, notably that if she disappeared one day, they should be worried and look at her husband.
These testimonies come as a terrible shock to Emily, the couple's daughter.
I know my father wouldn't hurt a fly. It annoys me, because saying negative things like that, it could influence the investigators and reinforce their idea that he's the perfect culprit. And as it happens, they think, why not? Since this or that person is telling us that Patrick is potentially dangerous.
On the strength of these testimonies, the investigators are now favoring the lead of a domestic dispute. They no longer believe Patrick Chabert.
No one saw her again after she was dropped off at the traffic circle by the supermarket in Haute-Savoie. He said, I dropped her off there. They didn't find the friend who was supposed to pick her up to take her to the train station. So he's the perfect suspect in the Chabert case.
But what would the husband's motive be?
Research is carried out into the couple's assets. They start to wonder about what could have led Patrick Chabert to kill his wife. It could just be this house, which Patrick Chabert built on the family plot, and to which he is very attached. And this house belongs to Nadine Chabert.
Patrick Chabert doesn't know it yet, but the Martigues police now suspect him of being involved in his wife's disappearance. The investigators no longer believe him when he says that he dropped off his wife on Tuesday, June 10, 2003, around 2 p.m. at this traffic circle on the outskirts of Fosse-sur-Mer. Trying to reveal his contradictions, the police attempt to retrace Nadine Chabert's last steps. On Tuesday, June 10, 2003, Nadine Chabert went to work like every morning.
She was completely normal, smiling and energetic. When it was time to finish, she told us she was in a hurry. She had an appointment in Aix-en-Provence as part of the arbitration for her divorce.
At around 12:30 p.m., she said goodbye to her colleagues.
She left saying, this way it will be over and I'll be better off.
Emily Chabert remembers that day very well.
June 10th was 16 years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. My father wasn't working because in the afternoon he had his grandmother's funeral. I got up late. I didn't have class. There were school strikes. Around noon, I set the table with my father. He was making food. We waited for my mother. She was late.
According to Patrick Chabert, Nadine got home at around 1 p.m.
She was on the phone with one of my cousins. They both talked about the funeral, and she said, I'm putting Patrick on. She passed me the phone. I talked to my cousin. Patrick, will you and your cousins be able to carry the coffin? I said, yes, no problem.
The couple then had lunch with Emily.
The three of us ate together in front of the TV. My father left to get ready, and I was with them too because I had to get ready to go horseback riding. I could hear them talking. I even heard my mother making fun of my father because he didn't know what to wear, because there was a heat wave. But he was still going to church, to the funeral, so he still had to get dressed.
Around 1:45 p.m., Emily left for her grandmother's, who was supposed to take her to her riding lesson.
Emily came home because she had forgotten her riding boots. She talked with her mother and she left.
Nadine Chabert kissed her daughter.
As I left, she gave me a kiss. She said to me, I love you, my baby, as usual.
A few minutes later, the couple drove away from the property.
I didn't see them driving away, but my grandmother saw them through the window.
According to Patrick Chabert, it was then 2 o'clock. He remembers that he was in a hurry to get on the road to cover the 25 miles to the cemetery in Arles, where his grandmother was to be buried. That's why he couldn't drive his wife to the station.
She said, drop me off here. And I went to the cemetery in Arles for my grandmother's funeral.
On the way, Patrick Chabert phoned his brother.
I called my brother because I couldn't remember where the Trangtaillis cemetery was. He quickly gave me directions and I arrived on time.
Patrick Chabert's family members are questioned. They confirmed that he did arrive at the cemetery around 3 p.m. After the ceremony, there was a small reception in Arles, at the home of Patrick Chabert's uncle.
After being in an atmosphere like that, I said, okay, I'm going back because Emily is horseback riding. I went to the stables for a while. We got McDonald's, then we went home.
The three of us ate together at my parents' house, my grandmother, my father, and me.
Finally, Patrick Chabert tells the investigators that he slept at home that evening and that he got up early the next morning to go to work on the La Farled prison construction site in Toulon. The police then examined Nadine and Patrick Chabert's phone records on the day of the disappearance. It seems that Nadine did receive a call from her husband's cousin at 1:06 p.m. when she was returning home for lunch. This fully matches what Patrick Chabert said. After, Nadine had no more phone calls. Strangely, her email was checked at 7:06 p.m. and 10:29 p.m., and her phone was in Fosse-sur-Mer at the time.
Nadine Chabert's phone was traced near the family home.
The police then look at Patrick Chabert's phone records. On July 24, 2003, 6 weeks after the disappearance, they make an important discovery. They learn that the husband and father tried to contact his wife at 2:42 a.m., the night after Nadine disappeared.
This call did not come from the house in Fosse-sur-Mer. It came from a hotel on the outskirts of Toulon.
Why did Patrick Chabert say that he slept at home? What was he doing at a hotel 70 miles from Fosse-sur-Mer? The police are now convinced that Patrick Chabert is hiding something from them. Jean-Marc, we're on the Chabert's family property. The police managed to retrace Nadine Chabert's last steps before her disappearance. They know it was around 2 p.m. when her daughter Emily said goodbye to her mother for the last time. Afterwards, it's a mystery.
Patrick Chabert states that he dropped his wife off at a traffic circle outside Fosse-sur-Mer, where she was supposed to meet one of her co-workers to leave for Paris. According to Nadine's co-workers, she was in a hurry to leave because she had an appointment at 3 p.m. at the ex-courthouse for her divorce proceedings. On the one hand, she gives a family reason to her colleagues to justify her absence. On the other hand, she gives a professional reason to her family to justify this same absence. Nadine Chabert can't be in two different places at the same time. She can't be everywhere at once.
So we're coming back to the same conclusion. Either Patrick Chabert is lying, or Nadine Chabert is the one who lied. Let's start first with the latter possibility, which puts us on the lead of a voluntary departure. What, in your opinion, are the arguments in favor of this?
The important thing is the testimonies of her husband, her mother, and her daughter, who say she went away regularly for no reason, without warning, without giving serious reasons, and without even taking care of her daughter Emily, who was then 11 years old. Another argument is the fact that most of her personal belongings have disappeared, and the family savings have also disappeared.
Jean-Marc, something else could suggest that Nadine Chabert lied to arrange her departure. She left her job saying that she was going to see the judge at 3 p.m. for her divorce. But she said that it was for arbitration, meaning an appointment that her husband had to attend. However, she must have known that Patrick Chabert couldn't be there because he was going to his grandmother's funeral.
Yes, you're right. That's one more argument that supports the idea that Nadine Chabert left of her own free will. But there are also several things that suggest Patrick Chabert is not telling the whole truth. First, some of Nadine Chabert's colleagues have said she was afraid of her husband, and that if something happened to her, if she disappeared, this should be looked into. Then, the investigators established that Patrick Chabert lied about his whereabouts the night after his wife disappeared. And finally, he was the last person to see his wife alive. This is why the investigators reasonably suspect him.
While a national missing person appeal to find Nadine Chabert is launched by the police on July 29, 2003, a month and a half after her disappearance, the police decide to put pressure on the husband. They want to know why he lied about his movements on the night his wife disappeared. On July 29, 2003 at 10:25 a.m., Patrick Chabert is taken into custody at the Martigues police station.
You don't understand why you're here. I've only seen police custody in movies. So here I am in custody, bombarded with questions. There's the good cop and the bad cop.
The investigators want to confront him with his contradictions. First question, why on the night of June 10th to 11th was your phone traced to La Garde near Toulon, when you told us you spent the night at home? Patrick Chabert's answer is surprising. I remember that I slept at the Ibis Hotel in La Garde.
He tells them that he had forgotten. But in fact, he had to meet with a supplier the next morning.
Patrick Chabert's phone records confirm that he called the hotel to book a room from his home at 11:01 p.m. How could Patrick Chabert have forgotten that he spent the night at a hotel?
When you lose your grandmother, after all, she's your mom's mom, that throws you off balance. You go to work, you have the funeral, you see your family, your mom who's crying, so you don't have the state of mind to remember all the details they want to hear.
To verify Patrick Chabert's statements, the investigators call the hotel. The receptionist confirms to them that he arrived at 2:30 that night, but that he left the next morning without having breakfast.
Patrick Chabert did not meet the supplier, on account of whom he went to spend the night at the hotel in Toulon.
The police then asked Patrick Chabert why his wife's phone was traced near their home on the evening of her disappearance.
This is something he doesn't understand, and he can't offer any explanation.
While the interrogation of Patrick Chabert continues, the police ask Helen Perez to bring Emily to the Fosse-sur-Mer police station.
She said to me, "Granny, don't leave me." I said, "No, I'm not leaving you. I'll wait for you." Because, of course, she went for the interrogation by herself, an 11-year-old kid. After 15 or 20 minutes, a policeman came and told me, "You have to go to Martigues." I said, "What about my granddaughter?" And he said, "Don't worry, we'll bring her back."
At the Martigues police station, Helen Perez is distraught at the turn her interview takes.
I was immediately accused of, I quote, "making my daughter disappear." For them, the culprits were Patrick and me. They used vulgar language, saying the old woman slept with the young man, stuff like that. That's how the police treated me.
But the worst thing for Helen Perez is knowing that Emily is alone with police officers.
My granddaughter was still at the police station in Fosse. It was terrible. I feel resentful because you think your granddaughter is alone. You haven't done anything. You wonder why you're here. It's terrible.
Helen Perez and Emily are soon allowed to return home. Patrick Chabert, meanwhile, is still facing the police. He's been in custody for more than 24 hours. The investigators now want to know why he didn't tell them about the divorce appointment scheduled for the afternoon of June 10th. Patrick Chabert answers very simply. Nadine didn't tell me about it. I knew that this arbitration had to take place, but I didn't know when.
I found out that day that there was the first arbitration, even though I didn't receive anything about it. Why didn't I receive the letter? Admittedly, I wasn't at home, so I couldn't open my mail. We had the same lawyer. Why didn't he call me? Why didn't he call me just once? I couldn't know about something that I was completely unaware of.
If a letter arrived during the week, it's possible that she could have hidden it. And that isn't shocking because she was hiding everything from us. Her life had become a mystery.
While Patrick Chabert is still in custody, the police decide to search his car, which is in the police station's parking lot. In the trunk, they find a strand of hair. They take samples from the vehicle. The findings are placed under seal and sent to the Genetic Institute of Nantes to be analyzed. Without material evidence or a confession, the police decide to end Patrick Chabert's custody. He then goes home.
I saw him come home in a bad way, crying, falling on the floor, saying, "I swear I didn't kill your mother, I swear." That's when I told him that I knew he didn't, and he just had to get up. I knew because I was there.
Nagar, we heard Emily Chabert's grandmother describe how her 11-year-old granddaughter was taken alone to a police station to be interrogated. We can imagine how difficult this situation must have been to go through. Are there special provisions to protect children involved in an investigation?
Yes, in general, there are special provisions for minors according to their age and their status, victim, accused, or witness. When they're a witness, for example, a minor under the age of 16 doesn't have to take an oath and is questioned for no longer than 4 hours. But in principle, this is without their parents or legal representatives, even if sometimes the investigators permit it to put the child at ease. Returning to our case, Nadine Chabert's daughter was questioned as a witness, but it is true that the investigators were rather inflexible since they questioned her alone without anyone to accompany her.
During her interrogation, the police accused Helen Perez, Patrick Chabert's mother-in-law, of sleeping with her son-in-law and being involved in her daughter's disappearance. Despite these accusations, Helen Perez was not placed in police custody and was questioned as part of a simple interview. Why, in your opinion?
For a person to be placed in police custody, which is quite a serious measure, the Code of Criminal Procedure requires there to be plausible reasons to suspect them of committing or attempting to commit a crime or offense. If the investigators didn't take Helen Perez into custody and instead questioned her as a witness, it was probably because they didn't have enough objective evidence against her. But because they probably had suspicions, they tried to throw her off by accusing her of having sex with her son-in-law or of being involved in her daughter's disappearance.
At the end of Patrick Chabert's custody, the police are convinced he killed his wife. However, they let him return home and see his young daughter without taking any special measures. Do you find this normal?
Taking away a child is a serious and exceptional decision that can only be made by a family judge, and which is justified only if the child is in danger with their family. Here, this isn't the case. First, Patrick Chabert is presumed innocent. Second, although it may seem shocking given the nature of the offense, there's no indication that his daughter is in danger, which would justify referral to a family judge.
Convinced of Patrick Chabert's guilt, the police continue their investigation. Since the start, they've had the unwavering support of Nadine's best friend. She was the one who, on the first day, called the police to report her missing. This friend, who we will call Natalie, lives in Haute-Savoie.
She's heavily involved in this case. She was heavily involved in Nadine's life since they saw and called each other very often. But she's also heavily involved in the investigation.
Right away she gets involved. Immediately she has a conviction. Her conviction is that Nadine did not disappear, but was killed by her husband.
Natalie doesn't just share her suspicions with the police.
She intervenes and almost directs the investigators by saying, "Follow this lead, look here, do this, do that," and the investigators follow.
They even start the search by listening to apparent revelations by Natalie's psychic friend, who thinks he knows where Nadine Chabert's body is. In vain. The best friend keeps getting actively involved in the investigation.
She puts out her own missing persons appeal. She conducts her own searches at the same time as the police's searches. She's very involved.
Natalie puts these homemade missing posters up with her friends all over the city.
Even more than the investigators, she plays detective. She carries out a police investigation without any kind of authorization, a private investigation.
A few days after Nadine's disappearance, Natalie, accompanied by some friends, goes to the Chabert's house to conduct a search.
They came to search my garage. They went into the garage. It was okay, it ended there. I stayed calm. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people must have been there. Does that seem normal to you? It's a violation of privacy.
Natalie regularly emails and phones Patrick Chabert.
That person sent a lot of emails to my father and my grandmother. They were threatening emails with harsh and mocking words.
In one of her emails to Patrick Chabert, Natalie writes, for example, "A multitude of eyes are on you and looking at you. We won't let you go, I promise. For Nadine." Natalie even takes the initiative to contact Child Protective Services, convinced she has a role to play when it comes to Emily.
She tried to get involved in my school. She came to see my principal. She tried, I think, to have me taken away, to make my father lose custody.
We had the impression that she wanted to get her hands on my granddaughter and that she wanted to come and run the house.
Her attitude appalls Emily Chabert.
She was against us. She fought against us. She called the police, harassed us, told lies, and gave false testimonies. Honestly, I don't understand.
I think she's a manipulator.
Nadine Chabert's family rues the day the two women met, 3 years before the disappearance, because this new friendship quickly took over.
Nadine Chabert was enthralled by this woman. They would talk on the phone for hours. We even thought there was something more between them.
Natalie, 10 years Nadine's senior, lived far from Haute-Savoie, but the two friends were in constant contact.
They were on the phone 24/7, figuratively speaking. They called each other every night. They would go away at weekends, and I had the feeling, as a child, that she was stealing my mom from me.
Months pass, and the police still don't know what happened to Nadine Chabert. In December 2003, 6 months after the young woman disappeared, the Marseille Homicide Unit takes over the case. They do everything they can to find evidence of her husband's guilt. On March 4, 2004, 9 months after Nadine's disappearance, the Marseille Homicide Unit, accompanied by crime scene technicians, inspects the Chabert's home. Convinced that the husband killed his wife in the family home, the investigators search for traces of blood invisible to the naked eye. All the rooms of the house are checked with Crime Scope.
It turns out that there are no traces of blood. There is nothing in particular that can help their investigation.
The next day, the investigators return to the Chabert's house to take the couple's computer to be examined. A few days later, the results come in, and the report provides disturbing information.
The investigators find out that the day after his arrest and his police custody, Patrick Chabert changed his computer's hard drive.
Why did Patrick Chabert do this? Did he want to hide incriminating data? The police officers didn't find the old hard drive in the house, so for now, they can't answer these questions. A few days later, on March 10, 2004, the investigators received the forensic results of the samples taken from the trunk of Patrick Chabert's car. On the strand of hair, mitochondrial DNA has been isolated.
Mitochondrial DNA can only be passed down from mother to child. So this mitochondrial DNA can't identify a person, but it can identify a maternal lineage. This means that this hair could come from the missing person or from her mother or daughter.
But for the investigators, there's no doubt. The hair found in the vehicle belongs to Nadine Chabert. According to them, this is proof that Patrick Chabert transported his wife's body in the trunk of his car. The police continue their investigation. They now look at the suspect's bank statements.
The police are interested in the payments made by Patrick Chabert on the nights of June 10th or 11th. They discover several things.
They see that Patrick Chabert paid a toll at 11:52 p.m. It was in Aubagne, halfway between his home in Fos-sur-Mer and his hotel in Toulon. The investigators decide to reconstruct Patrick Chabert's car journey on the evening of his wife's disappearance. They timed the journey between the Chabert's home in Fos-sur-Mer and the Aubagne toll booth.
The investigators repeat the route at fast and slow speeds.
This distance takes the police 49 minutes to cover.
It's known from reviewing his phone records that Patrick Chabert booked his hotel from his home at 11:01 p.m. This means that he set off just after to arrive at the toll booth by 11:52 p.m. So far, there's nothing out of the ordinary. This fits with the police officer's timing. However, the second part of Patrick Chabert's journey between the toll booth in Aubagne and the Ibis Hotel in Toulon poses a problem. The investigators take 35 minutes to travel this route. The husband should therefore have arrived at the hotel at around 12:30 a.m. So why did the hotel receptionist see him arrive at 2:30 in the morning?
There's a gap of about 2 hours.
It's like a black hole.
From then on, the investigators are convinced that it was during this gap that he got rid of his wife's body.
Armed with all this information, the investigators are now considering a murder scenario. On Tuesday, June 10, 2003, Patrick Chabert allegedly killed his wife at around 2 p.m., just after the family had lunch at home. The husband then allegedly hid the body in the trunk of his car before leaving at around 2 p.m. for his grandmother's funeral.
With Nadine Chabert still in the trunk, he would have returned home. He would have said to his mother-in-law, "Take care of Emily for the rest of the evening, because I have a business trip." From there, he would have taken advantage of the night to bury her in Toulon.
And not just anywhere in Toulon. Patrick Chabert worked on the construction site of La Forêt prison.
Nadine Chabert would have been buried in the foundations of La Forêt prison.
As proof, the police have a 2-hour gap in Patrick Chabert's schedule on the night of his trip to the hotel.
There was nothing to charge me with. There were only assumptions.
On May 19, 2004, a criminal investigation is opened for first-degree murder. And on June 13, 2004, 1 year after the disappearance of Nadine Chabert, her husband is again taken into custody after being arrested at his home.
I remember it was a Sunday evening. We were going to have dinner, and they arrived in several cars. There was a policeman who was huge compared to me, and really scary. As soon as I wanted to get up, he would lean on my shoulder so that I would sit back down. They threatened him in front of me, and just like that, he was gone one Sunday evening. I still have shocking images in my head.
They took me in. We got in the police car. I was told in a somewhat leading tone, "Come on, Chabert, stop playing around. We know where she is. Let's go."
The officers from the Marseille Homicide Unit are nervous because they want to get a confession at all costs. They know this second police custody can't exceed 17 hours. Time is running out. At 9:30 p.m., the interrogation begins.
They're not looking for Nadine. They're trying to make me confess the unspeakable, what they want to hear.
Quickly, the police play their trump card by revealing to Patrick Chabert the timing of their journey between Fosse-sur-Mer and the Toulon Hotel.
When they saw what time I left and what time I arrived, they loved it. They enjoyed it.
What were you doing during this period of more than 2 hours? The investigators ask. Patrick Chabert responds that he doesn't understand. He didn't stop.
The investigators said, "We felt he was ready to cave in."
Patrick Chabert holds steady and explains why he didn't arrive at the hotel right away.
Along the way, he realized he had left his computer at home. He decided to turn around to pick it up from home. But along the way, he reached into the back of his car and he realized that he had actually taken the computer with him. Then he turned back around to head to Toulon.
But for the investigators, this round trip in the night to collect his computer is hard to believe.
I explain it. They say it's not true.
What harms Patrick Chabert is his inconsistencies, his different stories, his U-turns, his reversals.
After 15 hours of police custody on June 14, 2004 at 12:30 p.m., 1 year after the disappearance of his wife, Patrick Chabert is brought before the examining magistrate. He is then indicted for first-degree murder.
It's cruel, because he did nothing, and I will never change my mind about that.
The examining magistrate decides not to incarcerate Patrick Chabert. The husband and father then leaves the courthouse. Placed under judicial supervision, he must report once a week to the Martigues police station.
I was released on the street. I took a taxi and I paid the driver once I got home. Because I had nothing on me. Like a dog, that's what I was. I realized it and I thought, I'm going to suffer.
He was traumatized. I saw he wasn't clean-shaven, and he was tired. He came home without a phone. He had nothing. He was crying. You know what custody is like.
Jean-Marc, it's clear that Patrick Chabert's nighttime trip to Toulon, a trip he didn't mention of his own accord, is at the heart of the accusations. What do you think of the explanation that Patrick Chabert offered the investigators?
To say the least, Patrick Chabert had trouble convincing the investigators that he was telling the truth. The first thing is that this trip seems very strange. It seems rushed, even improvised. At 11:01 p.m., Patrick Chabert booked a room at the hotel and he immediately hit the road, under the pretext of meeting one of his suppliers there the next morning. He never saw this supplier. He didn't even have breakfast at the hotel. So, of course, this arouses the investigators' suspicions. If we add to this the 2-hour gap in the trip to the hotel, it's understandable why the police imagine that this trip had no other purpose than to get rid of his wife's body.
So for the investigators, Patrick Chabert transported his wife's body in his car. Proof of this is the strand of hair that was found in his trunk.
No, for me this hair isn't proof. Not only are we unsure whether it belongs to Nadine Chabert, and even if that were the case, it would have 1,001 other reasons to be in the trunk of the car. The real problem is that the murder scenario, as imagined by the investigators, is not based on any material evidence when it comes to the murder, transporting the body, or disposing of the body. In this case, there is no evidence. There are no witnesses, there is no confession, and there is no body.
Years pass without new evidence being brought to the case. And in 2010, 6 years after Patrick Chabert was indicted, the examining magistrate decides to send him before the court of Aix-en-Provence. The aggravating circumstance of premeditation is removed from the legal classification of the offense. Patrick Chabert will be tried for killing his wife. He risked 30 years in prison. On September 22, 2010, the trial of Patrick Chabert opens at the Aix-en-Provence courthouse.
I arrive with a confident state of mind, since I don't understand what I'm being accused of, since there's nothing behind these accusations. There's no proof, only claims. There are no physical traces, nothing that proves that I could have killed my wife.
For 3 days, two camps will face off. On one side, Patrick Chabert's family, convinced of his innocence. On the other, Nadine's friends and colleagues who, on the stand, describe a dangerous, violent, and manipulative husband. Soon the prosecution's case seems to be prevailing.
I think the hardest thing was seeing my father in the dock, completely crushed by this judge, whose questions were always an attack on him.
The trial is open. You may sit down.
Emily is called to the stand.
I was so overwhelmed. I couldn't speak. They asked me a few questions. I was on the verge of fainting. I really couldn't breathe. I failed to defend us, and I still regret that.
Patrick Chabert shares this regret.
It went wrong because I didn't know how to defend myself. I couldn't defend myself. When you're innocent, you defend yourself very badly, since you're trying to justify something that you didn't do, but you don't know how to say it.
At the end of the third day of the trial, the jury retires to deliberate. Patrick Chabert waits for the verdict.
I thought then, that'll do it. That'll do it, but I had doubts. And then the verdict came in.
Patrick Chabert is sentenced to 20 years in prison for the murder of his wife.
It was terrible. It was. It made me... I was mad at my daughter.
Nadine Chabert's mother doesn't understand this verdict.
Especially since we had a lawyer who always told us, in this case, there's nothing. You'll see. There's nothing in this case file. You're not at risk. He got 20 years.
When the verdict is announced, Emily, the couple's daughter, cries out.
I heard it. I can still hear it.
That cry from Emily was heart-wrenching. It was terrible. It was a cry of, I don't know how to say it. It was more than despair. Distress, I don't know. I can't find a word strong enough to describe that cry.
I didn't believe it. I was crying. I was screaming. For me, it was inconceivable to be told that my father was being sentenced to 20 years for killing my mother. I'll say it again. If I had the slightest doubt about my father, I would have put him through hell. I would have been the first to bring him down.
Emily is still angry today.
The justice system, instead of thinking, my God, we're going to try to find a missing woman, crushed us. They belittled us. They did us in.
Patrick Chabert is taken to the Luynes Penitentiary.
I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing here? I thought to myself, what the hell am I doing here? I'm going to have to fight now to show them that they all screwed up. I will prove it, and I will get out.
Patrick Chabert immediately appeals against his conviction. His daughter and mother-in-law continue to support him. Together, they contact the association Action Justice, which fights against miscarriages of justice. They then fight to get Patrick Chabert's innocence recognized during his second trial.
My father shouldn't be in prison. I don't know where my mother is. What do? Do I stay passive? Do I wait for something to happen? No, we go to war. Our lives are at stake.
To go to war, Emily, her grandmother, and her father hire new lawyers.
We meet up regularly. We get out there to prove that the prosecution's case against him has nothing to do with the reality of this case.
Philippe Weiner, former commissioner and member of the Action Justice Association, created by Roland Agré, is responsible for conducting this counter-investigation.
After reading the case file, what do I notice? There's only one lead. It's Chabert. They're not looking at anything else.
I've rarely seen a criminal case handled so flippantly.
The first inconsistency raised by the counter-investigation is the murder scenario envisaged by the investigators. Patrick Chabert allegedly killed his wife at home right after lunch. So why didn't Nadine's mother living next door hear anything? Claude Llorente, Patrick Chabert's new lawyer, goes to the scene to examine the layout of the property.
We tried sound effects and noise. If someone screams, it can be heard.
I would have been able to hear. On June 10th, it was very hot. Everything was open. That's how I know Patrick didn't do anything.
The investigators are convinced that Patrick Chabert then transported his wife's body in the trunk of his car. How come Emily and her grandmother didn't see anything?
The place where the cars are parked can be seen directly from the grandmother's house. He would have had to drag the body, bend it, put it in the car in full view of everyone, and leave. It doesn't make sense.
I was there. I was there. My father didn't kill her. I was there. If there's one thing that proves that my father is innocent, the strongest one is me. I was there. There was no murder. I was there.
Patrick Chabert allegedly then went to his grandmother's funeral with his wife's corpse in the trunk of his car. Is it possible that this body, transported for several hours in the blazing sun, left no biological traces in the vehicle?
There would have been odors. The sphincters relax. It was impossible. It would surely have left a lot of traces.
However, the samples taken from the trunk showed nothing.
The forensic police spared no expense. Once they had the perfect culprit, they needed forensic proof to foil him. And they didn't find anything except for a hair, which, again, is obviously not serious.
According to the murder scenario proposed during the investigation, Patrick Chabert allegedly buried his wife's body at the construction site of La Farled prison. It's a completely unfounded theory, according to Emily Chabert's lawyer.
We learned that in June 2003, at the time of Nadine Chabert's disappearance, contrary to what the prosecution argued, it wasn't possible to sink a body into the concrete, simply because the walls had been built a long time before.
It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing that the investigators didn't do such basic checks.
The Chabert's family's lawyers also want to take apart the alleged motive of the crime. So they look into the appointment with the family judge on June 10, 2003. the day of Nadine's disappearance, and they discover a shocking piece of information.
We learned that the appointment with the family judge had been canceled.
At around 3 p.m., someone phoned the family judge to warn him that the Chabert couple, stuck in traffic, would not be able to make the appointment.
That's a mystery. Who phoned? We don't know.
It wasn't Mrs. Chabert or Mr. Chabert. We looked at their phone records. It wasn't either of them.
Something particularly surprising is that the person who phoned, claiming the Chaberts were held up, asked to set a new appointment with the judge. Patrick Chabert's lawyer believes he knows who made this mysterious phone call.
It was someone eager for the divorce, and that can only be Mrs. Chabert. So now, we're almost certain that she called from a cell phone that wasn't her own. We don't know why. So she was alive and well during that call. So that rules out the murder at 2 p.m., which is what Mr. Chabert is accused of.
While the counter-investigation continues, Emily regularly goes to the visiting room at the Louis Penitentiary.
When we went to see him, strangely, he was always smiling. I think it was a way to reassure and protect us. But I don't know how much weight he lost. He was extremely thin. I think it was the worst time of my life.
I looked forward to visits only to see my daughter. I had my friends, my parents, and my grandmother, but your daughter is your daughter. We had 40 minutes, but 40 minutes felt like a second.
Between 2 visits, Emily also starts looking for evidence to exonerate her father. She searches the house and finds the hard drive of the family computer in the garage, the infamous hard drive that the investigators accused Patrick Chabert of getting rid of.
The hard drive was in its box in the garage. I came across it straight away. If he had wanted to hide it, I think he would have thrown it in the trash.
Next to the hard drive, Emily discovers several strange documents.
I found notes about rites, potions, conditioning, and purification. What really scared me is that inside there was a method about how to get to life after death. I found the notes terrifying.
These things reveal, to put it simply, a new Nadine Chabert.
What if examining these notes could have changed the course of the investigation?
In this procedure, absolutely nothing was done on Nadine Chabert. The investigators can't tell you who she was, how she changed.
However, in the early days of the investigation, occult writings and sketches made by Nadine Chabert were found in the trunk of her car.
I understand that these things were not of interest to the prosecution, since they needed to establish Patrick Chabert's guilt. But I think it wasn't Patrick Chabert's guilt that needed to be established. It was the reason for Nadine Chabert's disappearance. It's something else entirely.
With the counter-investigation highlighting the lack of material evidence, Patrick Chabert finally hopes to make his voice heard and prove his innocence at his appeal trial. We heard Patrick Chabert express his inability to prove his innocence during his first trial. What he says is very interesting. I quote, "When you're innocent, you defend yourself very badly, since you're trying to justify something that you didn't do. But Nagar, it wasn't up to him to prove his innocence."
In criminal law, there's a fundamental principle, the presumption of innocence, which is followed by another procedural principle, It's up to the public prosecutor to prove the defendant's guilt. But to return to our case, Patrick Chabert is right. Because despite this principle, and especially when you don't have an alibi, as in his case, it can seem more and more difficult, even impossible, to defend yourself from something you didn't do, to try to prove something that doesn't exist.
Nadine Chabert's mother remembers her son-in-law's attorney assuring them that there was nothing in the case file and that Patrick Chabert would be found not guilty. Have you ever made this kind of prediction to your clients to reassure them?
It's always very tricky to make predictions. We never know what could happen during a trial because the justice system is human, and there are always things we might not take into consideration. For example, the general atmosphere, the defendant's attitude, the Chief Justice's personality, or the jurors' perceptions. The best thing to do, I think, is to explain to the client the strengths and weaknesses of their case, give them an idea of the risks, but also prepare them. And even if we're convinced they might be found not guilty, if things go wrong, it can come as a terrible shock.
To prepare for his appeal trial, Patrick Chabert reached out to the Action Justice Association to investigate. Shouldn't that be the role of defense lawyers?
What pushed Patrick Chabert to contact this association was most likely the feeling that the investigation didn't do enough in his defense, and that, especially when you're protesting your innocence, feels terrible. So regardless of whether it's objectively justified or not, from the moment Patrick Chabert loses confidence in the judicial system and given the weight of his sentence, it isn't strange for him to seek support from these kinds of associations.
On September 12, 2011, Patrick Chabert's appeal trial opens before the VAR court in Draguignan. The defendant, who has never stopped proclaiming his innocence, can once again count on the unwavering support of his daughter and his mother-in-law. In the early hours of the trial, the Chief Justice announces her decision to extend the duration of the debates by 2 days.
We think, finally, the case will be studied in full, and we'll be able to have our say.
I spared no effort to highlight before the Court of Appeal all the investigation's shortcomings, errors, and misdirection.
But in the middle of the trial, the results of the analysis of the hard drive that Emily found are communicated to the court with serious findings.
On his computer, searches were discovered relating to the decomposition of the human body after death. Obviously, the prosecution, once again, saw this as proof of guilt.
Patrick Chabert must then explain himself. According to him, he carried out these searches after his wife's friends came to his house to look for Nadine.
When people, not naming any names, come to your house saying, "You killed your wife. We're going to look for the body. We know where it is," you ask yourself questions. I thought, oh, what did they do? What did they do? They know something I don't know. So I did a search like that to find out what could happen. Can you imagine if these people had done something? Hidden something to make me take the blame? I was trying to understand.
He was afraid. He was afraid the body was hidden in his house. This is someone who's being plagued by the accusation. You killed your wife. He lost his grip.
Although the defense is in a bad position, Emily's testimony will rock the trial.
I said everything I had to say, unlike the first trial, because now I was prepared and I knew what to expect. And I regretted that the first time. I hadn't managed to say more. I was scared. Now I wasn't. I wanted to make myself heard.
Emily comes and explains, clinging to the witness stand, that she has already lost her mother. She begs them to stop the massacre. That's her expression. She begs them not to take her dad away from her.
She said those words as if she were a 10-year-old little girl crying, and I think everyone cried at that moment. Excuse me. The tragedy was there, made reality. Because this young girl's innocence, compared to the brutality of injustice, is just such a blinding paradox that you can't help but get upset.
Emily knows that her words will be decisive.
I wanted to make myself heard. I wanted to say what I had to say. I spoke from my heart and said everything I knew.
At 20 years old, with all her strength, courage, and emotion, I think she was the major figure of that trial.
Patrick Chabert, in the dock, listens proudly to his daughter.
She trusts her father. Her father is innocent. She demonstrates that her father is innocent. But her childhood was stolen from her. Her childhood was stolen. I will never forgive what was done to my daughter.
On December 20th, 2011, night has already fallen in Draguignan. Jury retires, and after 4 hours of deliberations, Patrick Chabert is found not guilty.
The first reaction came from the police officers behind me. Don't worry, Mr. Chabert. Everything will be fine. You're innocent.
You start crying without meaning to. The tears just flow, tears of joy. Emily was reunited with her dad.
I take my father in my arms. Finally. I was happy. Happy to think, wow, it's finally over.
In tears, Patrick Chabert then makes a promise to his daughter.
We're going to look for Mom. We're going to look for Mom.
We're going to look for Mom. A new fight begins for Patrick Chabert. Acquitted and released after 15 months in prison, he now wants to know what happened to his wife. Jean-Marc, 8.5 years after the disappearance of his wife, Patrick Chabert is exonerated. The justice system has finally recognized his innocence. So Patrick Chabert was telling the truth when he said at the start of the case that he had dropped his wife off at the traffic circle outside Fosse-sur-Mer. Do you think Nadine Chabert was really meeting someone there on Tuesday, June 10, 2003?
Yes, it's very likely. Patrick Chabert has always stated that he dropped his wife off at this traffic circle at her request. This means she was meeting someone near or at this traffic circle, and she intended to leave with this person. You don't ask to be dropped off at a traffic circle randomly, no. Nadine Chabert didn't leave alone on a whim. She had prepared, organized, and premeditated her departure.
Which would mean, Jean-Marc, that she lied to her husband when she said she was going to Paris for a training course. And she also lied to her colleagues when she told them she had an appointment with a judge for her divorce proceedings.
Yes, this double lie allowed her to avoid arousing suspicions about her absence, at least until the next morning.
When the investigators first came to the Chabert's home, they noticed when they opened her wardrobe that many of her belongings were missing. According to Emily, her daughter, only old clothes were left. Everything she usually wore had disappeared, including her luggage. However, Patrick Chabert said that when he dropped his wife off at the traffic circle, she was only carrying a small bag. How do you explain this?
I think Nadine Chabert had packed her things in her luggage, which she had entrusted to someone before her departure on June 10, 2003. This suggests two things. On the one hand, she prepared and premeditated this departure, and on the other hand, she intended to leave her family and her job for a long time.
As we saw after his acquittal, Patrick Chabert promised his daughter to look for her mother. Together again, Emily, her grandmother, and her father try to pursue all the necessary leads. Emily is now convinced that her mother left the family home voluntarily, perhaps to join her friend Natalie, who lived in the Alps.
When she went missing, for me, she left for Haute-Savoie. She was with her friend, and that's what I told the police. Surely she must be hiding there, because I was used to her going to stay with her almost every weekend.
Nadine Chabert used to phone Natalie daily.
Emily had even heard her mother say several times on the phone, quote, "But if I leave, who will take care of them?"
The wife and mother didn't hide her escape plan.
I met her for an interview to offer her a permanent position. When I offered her this indefinite contract, she said to me quite simply, "I'm sorry to turn you down, but I'm planning to leave the area." She wanted to go to Savoie, to a friend's house.
Nadine Chabert had also spoken to one of her colleagues about this departure. Dora Aiskiafi was never questioned during the investigation. Her testimony is nevertheless crucial.
She told me she was going to leave. She told me, "I'm going to join my friend in Savoie." She admired this lady in Savoie. She talked about her a lot.
But why would Nadine leave without Emily?
She told me, "I'm not taking my daughter. I'm leaving her with her father. I know he's going to take good care of her. They're very close." She had a tear in her eye.
So Nadine Chabert would have left for good on June 10, 2003, leading her family to believe that she was just going on a 3-day course in Paris.
I thought she told her husband about it, that she was going to tell him, "I'm leaving," and sort it out. No. She left. She had decided to leave. It was D-Day.
But why has Nadine Chabert never shown any signs of life again? Why would she decide to leave her family to join her friend in Savoie?
I'm convinced that she has a hold on my mother. I'm convinced of that, simply because little by little, by spending time with her, she had already totally changed.
Nadine Chabert had gone over to another world. She said herself that she had found a new family for herself. Those are her own words.
Nadine Chabert's occult writings describe strange spiritualism sessions with Natalie and some friends.
There were conversations with the dead. There were spiritualism sessions to go into the afterlife. There was clearly consumption of narcotic drugs to be in a position to communicate with the dead.
Could these practices be connected to Nadine Chabert's disappearance? To answer these questions, Sonia Jougla, a clinical psychologist specializing in cults, has studied the young woman's writings.
What jumps out is there are all the ingredients you find in other cults. This is a self-proclaimed leader. All the members of the group are under his thumb. These people no longer have any independence. They are in a state of complete submission from which they cannot get out.
So Nadine Chabert allegedly joined a cult. Is it possible that her disappearance has something to do with this group?
It's possible that she ran away with other members of the group, and that they were able to form a small group elsewhere to live out their spirituality and their madness in peace without anyone disturbing them. That's possible.
So Nadine Chabert could be alive 16 years after her disappearance.
I think yes, she's alive. Now, maybe she's afraid to come back. If I put myself in her place, you go, you leave your husband and your daughter, and you go. You hear that your husband has been charged with murder. She must have heard about it.
In my mind, my wife is still alive. I think I never speak in the past tense. Neither does Emily. And it's natural for us to think because as long as there's hope, there's life. Everything is connected. There you go.
However, Nadine Chabert's poor state of health at the time of her disappearance suggests a darker scenario.
I noticed that she had lost a lot of weight. She stopped eating or ate very little.
The week before she disappeared, the young woman didn't have the strength to go to work.
She had been on sick leave because she was very tired. She was really worn out.
Questioned by the Chabert family's lawyers, Nadine's doctor confirms that his patient was in very poor health.
Nadine Chabert had extremely low blood pressure, around 7, I think. For most doctors, if the pressure stays like this for a while, it puts the patient's life at risk.
And at that time, Nadine participated in spiritualism sessions, sometimes using narcotic drugs.
In my opinion, there must have been a session that went too far, where she took too many drugs. Not to say an overdose, but heart failure. For me, that's a possibility. It wasn't murder, it was a medical incident.
According to Emily, the members of her mother's new group of friends may have important information to offer.
I'm absolutely not saying that they're responsible for my mother's disappearance, in the sense that they harmed her or made her disappear. I wouldn't go that far, but I think they have the answer. And if, one day, they start talking, maybe we'll get the truth.
In May 2012, 9 years after Nadine Chabert went missing, Emily and her grandmother decide to file a report for abduction and illegal confinement. And it's after a long legal fight that in June 2016, they succeed in getting the case reopened. A new examining magistrate has been called in, and today the Marseille Missing Persons Unit is leading the investigation.
We fought extremely hard to get the case reopened, and I'm expecting a lot from this new team of investigators. I hope they can bring us something. I think they owe it to us.
Emily demands that her questions finally be answered.
Did she leave on her own? Did she want to make a new life for herself? In that case, I'll accept it. It's her choice. Did someone harm her? In that case, I won't accept it, and I will fight until the end of my days if she's been harmed to get justice.
Who could have harmed Nadine Chabert? There's a lead in the case that hasn't been sufficiently explored, involving a very close friend of the young woman.
In the environment, in Nadine's circle, there's someone who's rather unique, unusual, a little peculiar. We don't really know if he's a close friend, a lover, or both.
He was a family friend at the start, but lately he'd become particularly close to my mother. He was often at the house, until very late at night because our neighbor would see him. It could have been until 3 or 4 in the morning.
This man was called to testify at Patrick Chabert's first trial.
When this witness testified, we felt that he was totally in love with Nadine Chabert.
On the witness stand, the man said he had arranged to meet with Nadine Chabert the evening she disappeared. He was supposed to meet her in Martigues to go to the theater. Could the young woman have lied to her husband about going to Paris for a course so that she could meet with her lover in the evening? What if the theater outing that night had turned nasty?
Maybe he wanted to go a little further. And this man, disappointed and crazy in love, thought, since it's not working out, I'll get rid of her. Who knows? This lead wasn't explored.
Today, Nadine Chabert's family is fighting for the investigators to finally pursue all possible leads.
They're clinging to the hope that we lawyers have, by telling ourselves that the justice system is capable of everything, including getting to the truth.
Jean-Marc, what do you think of the lead of the friend who Nadine Chabert was supposed to meet the evening she disappeared?
I think that Nadine Chabert never met this man and she never went to the theater. As we've seen, she prepared for her departure with two lies, one to her family, the other to her co-workers, so that no one would be concerned by her absence. It certainly wasn't to go a few miles from her house the same evening to a public place.
We heard the former commissioner, Philippe Weiner, who led the counter-investigation, mention the possibility of a heart attack. It was established that Nadine Chabert sometimes used drugs and that she had been on sick leave the week before her disappearance because she was extremely weak. Do you think something serious happened to Nadine Chabert?
If Nadine Chabert had died of a heart attack in a public place, obviously her body would have been discovered and her family would have been informed. But in a private and isolated place, where people may be bound by a pact, such a death can remain a secret and the body can be hidden. Be careful. This is just a theory. It's a serious accusation, but it isn't based on any evidence.
The last theory, Jean-Marc, is the one her family believes in, that Nadine Chabert is still alive and under the influence of a cult.
It's true that at the time of her disappearance, Nadine Chabert's psychological profile corresponded to those of cult victims. Some of these movements may live off-grid in France or elsewhere. It's quite possible that Nadine Chabert chose to live her life cut off from the world. I'm not saying that she is physically being kept prisoner, but simply psychologically dependent on this type of organization. If one day she manages to break the psychological link that binds her to this cult, she could reappear, even 16 years later.
I was angry with her for a long time. It's normal, because a lot of negative things have resulted from her going missing. But I think that as I get older, the anger is fading. And I love her. She gave me a great upbringing. I have wonderful memories of her. And what I want to remember about her is only the positive.
I would never be mad at my wife. I would never be mad at her. The only thing I would reproach her for is, why didn't you call your daughter? That's all. You don't care about me, but she's your daughter. Call your daughter.
Emily no longer had her mom. The first Christmas, we asked her what she wanted for Christmas. She said, I would like my mom. And there was nothing we could do. There was nothing we could do.
If anyone knows anything, I beg you, come forward. Come and see us. The police. Something. I know it's hard. It's terrifying. But I think someone knows something. And I hope that if they hear us, they will be willing to help us.
What I would like to tell her is simply not to be afraid to come back, okay? Your mother's number hasn't changed, Nadine. It's still the same one as when you were young, and it's the one I was calling you on. It hasn't changed at all. So please call. Not for me, for your daughter. If you don't want to do it for your mother, at least for your daughter. Your daughter is gorgeous. She's 27 years old.
Soon, Emily Chabert will be the age her mother was when she disappeared. Soon, hopefully, she'll know the truth. A truth that the justice system has not, for the moment, managed to bring to light. A truth that must be hidden in the thick file of this unsolved case. The Marseille Missing Persons Unit is conducting new interviews and looking for new testimonies. For Emily, her grandmother, her father, and for Nadine Chabert, of course, it's time to tell the truth.